Just a word of caution, this podcast does contain material related to sexual assault, which could be upsetting to some listeners. Please make sure you're emotionally resourced and seek help from a trauma specialist or medical professional if you need it.
I would hate to go on with my life always wishing I had reported and not having done it.
Hi, and welcome to Slut or Nut, the podcast.
Tell it to me straight. Don't leave out a word. Don't leave out anything you think I should have.
I'm Kelly Showker, and I'm the director of Slut or Nut, The Diary of a Rape Trial, which is a feature-length documentary film exploring what it is like to report rape and following activist Mandi Gray as she fights to change how victims of sexual assault are treated by the criminal justice system. You can also find the show notes related to this episode on our site and more episodes of Slut or Nut the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and on our website at www.slutornut.ca. We're going to be talking to experts in the field of sexual assault and also to people who have experienced sexual assault. And if you'd like to share your own story of sexual assault, gender-based violence, or your expertise on the legal system or trauma related to sexual assault, and you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please email us at slutornutthemovie@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at slutornutthemovie, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel where these podcasts will also be posted. So I'm sitting here speaking with Mandi Gray.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mandi Gray. I am the primary subject in the Slut or Nut documentary film. I am a PhD student at York University here in Toronto, and I am also an advocate for those people who've experienced sexual violence.
And I met Mandi actually 3 years ago. Another female filmmaker who I really admired got in touch with me. Her name is Min-Suk Lee, and she's the director of Migrant Dreams. She got in touch with me and said, you have to meet this amazing woman named Mandi Gray. She's been sexually assaulted and she's fighting the system. You have to go meet her and maybe you guys can make a film. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go and meet her. And Mandi and I met and became not only partners in telling the story of the film and creating Slut or Nut, but also good friends.
Partners in crime.
Partners in crime and sisters in the effort to eradicate
the patriarchy.
Smash the patriarchy.
We are bonded for life.
We are the feminists that all the trolls tell you to be afraid of.
And you should be.
And you should be, because we will not stand down. Well, here's the police right now. Sirens are coming for us.
They heard crime and they were on their way over.
Exactly. So we wanted to make a radical feminist film to really show beyond the Me Too movement and us, posting on social media or making hashtags about I was sexually assaulted. What happens if you actually report sexual assault? But Mandi, why did you allow a film crew to follow you through such a personal process, and what was your motivation in making Slut or Nut, The Diary of a Rape Trial?
I saw some potential to help others and give them the tools of how to navigate these institutions. Like if they tell you you can't do something or you're not allowed to say this or do this, it's like, why not? And one major proponent of the type of sociology I study is how we utilize our everyday lived experiences to guide our practices, and what those experiences, the everyday, tell us about not only society but like how the world works. So when I was sexually assaulted and I was met with all these various institutional barriers, I recognized, of course, like my privilege, but also that there was something here that wasn't being represented in media. Documentary films about sexual violence focus narrowly on like the experience of sexual violence, but don't like provide tangible or actionable solutions to the problem. It's more so, here's the sad story about this victim who's really sad. We documented in the film the whole range of emotions, and I think that really surprises people. Like, oh, there's moments when you're like laughing and having fun, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a complex human.
Yeah, I'm not just like a dead flower that someone's stepping on.
Well, like I now give a warning before I start the film, like you can laugh, you can feel angry, you can feel sad, like all of that is valid because these are all the real emotions that we wanted to capture. The complexities of not just like the legal system, but also just like the human experience of having like gone through this, and also like empower people to speak out. For example, I just did a screening last week and a woman came up to me and said that she was sexually assaulted 45 years ago and had never gotten counseling. And now seeing this film, she's like, I think it's finally time. Another woman told me that she was sexually assaulted at university in 1965. The campus police told her not to report because she wasn't a virgin. And although all this time had passed, it doesn't really seem to matter because things seem so much the same.
It's so depressing. Likewise, since we've made the film, I've had both men and women as well come up to me. One man came up to me and said, you know, my wife actually reported sexual assault at her workplace recently, and I had no idea what it is that she's really going to face. I know now that this is going to be such an intense experience for both of us. So really trying to prepare people to know what is it like to be on that stand, and what is it like to have your story and your experience denied, your whole reality called into question by the legal system.
And it's not just the legal system either. Like it is when you report to a workplace, when you report to campus, like these tactics to discredit you and your credibility is at the center of all of these investigations, regardless of who is doing the investigating or who's doing the reporting, whether it's through an adversarial system like the courts or whether it is through a workplace investigation.
I think that's one of the most difficult things for victims to experience after they come forward with a sexual assault. And it was also one of the reasons that I personally wanted to make this film. When I was 17, I was raped by a family friend and a peer, and I told one person, and the first person that I told did not believe me, and they hung up the phone on me and kind of slut-shamed me and insinuated that I had instigated the situation, which was false because I was asleep when that situation started to happen. And after that, I never told anyone else. I didn't tell my parents for decades. I never reported it. And I went into it devastated me as a teenager, and I carried that trauma for years and never sought therapy. So I wanted to make this movie for my 17-year-old self to show that this happens to so many people, and you can report and you can stay strong, and you don't have to take the response of the people you tell as reality. You can hold your own reality. And that's another reason I was so impressed with Mandi when I met her, that she was standing her ground and not budging and fighting against the people who were not believing her and who didn't want to proceed forward with her case.
And I think that also speaks to like the importance of if you receive a disclosure, because that first person and how they respond to that disclosure will fundamentally determine how that person feels about it. So lots of research has shown if the first person you tell says, are you sure it was actually sexual assault?
Were you drunk?
Yeah, that person will likely carry that self-doubt and blame and not disclose, not report. And what I also think the film is really good too is that it shows people how you can receive a disclosure. So like my mom, for example, or my friend Mylene, who were just so supportive from the beginning. I think they serve as like really good role models in the film about how to receive a disclosure and how not to guide the process, but to like provide support through the process. Okay, when we were filming, what was the most surprising thing that you learned or something that happened?
One of the most shocking experiences for me while making the film, the production side, was we went to a rape kit nurse, a sexual assault evidence kit nurse in a hospital. So this is a person that when you report sexual assault, you go in to get the rape kit done, or the sexual assault evidence kit, which is the same thing, but we just kind of shorten it to rape kit. you go into the hospital. And when we went into the hospital to talk to the nurse, she took us into this room full of toys and little children's chairs. And I was like, where are we? Is this the room where are we? Like, why is this children's room inside the sexual assault evidence kit examining area? And she was like, this is where we talk to the children who have been sexually assaulted. And in reality, they deal more with minors than they do with adults. So it really is pervasive, and it's not only beneficial to talk about this stuff with adults, but it's also beneficial to talk about it with younger people and for parents to watch this film and think about it. And another thing that surprised me about the legal proceeding is, like, you imagine being in the courtroom and the victim's maybe, getting ready to go into the trial, and the man accused of raping her is like in a jumpsuit and handcuffs. That's not the reality either, because as soon as the charges are laid, they're not actually usually put in jail. They're just out. And they're not even like put back in jail before the trial. They're just out. So he was just in the hallway with us,
hanging out
at the snack bar downstairs with us, like wearing his suit, talking on his cell phone in the hallway,
being a fucking asshole.
Yeah, and it was just really uncomfortable to even be in the courtroom space.
Yeah, and just recently in Halifax, there was a case where the accused actually filmed the sexual assault on his cell phone, and the victim didn't know until she was on the stand and had to watch it while he was watching her watch him rape her. And she was forced to watch it 3 times over. And I've seen this happen in different ways, not usually with the accused who does the recording, but like with CCTV footage, you're forced to actually watch and explain like your reaction, when oftentimes what we know is the reaction is freezing.
Right.
And still that doesn't seem to register with most people. As we saw in my trial, you didn't run away, you didn't scream, you didn't call for help.
And not only to watch that footage, but also people have their social media picked apart. So women that report will find that the defense has entered tweets they tweeted or Facebook posts in as evidence to kind of like discredit them or call their character into question.
Even if your settings are set to private, it doesn't matter. They are very crafty in finding ways into your social media, and like, you really don't know who your friends are until you go through that trial process, because you have no idea what your friends are feeding to him or his lawyer, who his lawyer's talking to. Like, his lawyer was calling all sorts of people in my friend circle to try and get dirt on me.
Yeah. I think the stereotype people have is they see American courtroom dramas and they think every trial has a jury. And I know I myself was shocked to see that these trials do not have juries. It's just one judge that decides, and they're usually an older man. And the odds are so bad for getting a conviction. The odds are terrible. Like, you think that if you go to the police, you report the sexual assault, you go to the hospital, you get the rape kit done, you're forthcoming, you try to assist the authorities, you think in your head, this is going to happen. This person that sexually assaulted me, that raped me, is going to go to jail. He's going to be punished. Like, something's going to happen. But the odds are overwhelmingly against you. The reality is that it's probably not going to happen. He is probably not going to be convicted. He's probably going to be found innocent. And
if they lay charges at all. And it's only 3 out of every 1,000 sexual assaults that actually result in a conviction. So that's just blew my mind and is terrible. And you also think Canada is a really progressive place. So of course in Canada they would have a great system to deal with sexual assault, but they don't. It's terrible. And how many of those 3 are overturned in appeal?
Exactly. So speaking of appeal, do you want to catch us up to speed on the evolution of your case and where you stand now?
So he filed appeal like almost immediately after the conviction, which was expected because I did overhear his lawyers talking during the trial. She said, if there's a conviction, we're appealing it, which is pretty standard if dude has any financial resources. They appeal in sex assault cases because they can. and it drags out the process. The appeal took place. It was pretty brutal. It was really hard on me. The appeal decision kept getting pushed back. So almost a year, exactly 1 year after the conviction was overturned and they ordered a new trial. It wasn't because of anything I did. It was because of the judge, and he didn't rely on enough legal texts. So it was pretty much came down to a technicality in terms of how the law was used. And there was nothing I could have done differently, which was really frustrating. And I didn't want to go through a trial again because, like Kelly said, convictions are so rare to begin with. What objective would be met by going through all of this over again?
And just to explain a little bit, if your case goes to appeal and the appeal is successful, you have reported to the police that this person has sexually assaulted you, so they will do a retrial if it's thrown out on a technicality and the conviction isn't overturned. So Mandi was facing going through the whole entire trial again.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows how long that could have been. And then it opened me up. Imagine he was convicted again and having to go through another appeal, right? Like it just is like no end point. So I really had to self-advocate that I didn't want to go through a trial because you don't have agency or power when you're a victim because you're a victim witness and you don't have legal counsel. And so you can't just say, I don't want to do this and walk away. It's not that simple. And I also wanted to have what's referred to in Canada as a peace bond, which is like a restraining order that he couldn't contact me. And it would also lessen the ability of him suing me after. He refused to sign it. He wanted the Crown to discharge all of the charges and go on the record and say there was no likelihood of conviction, which she didn't agree with. I said, okay, let's do it. Let's go back to trial then. 2 days later, he signed the peace bond after nearly 3 years of being entangled in the legal system.
From what I understand, now you're facing going back to the university campus and he'll also be a returning student there.
Yeah, he's returning to campus in September from what I understand. The other thing is that the university has also breached the terms of settlement of my human rights complaint. So in the film, you will have seen that the university partnered with a sexual assault clinic to provide counseling to survivors of sexual assault on campus. They have canceled that contract and will no longer be providing that service. So I'm back in the legal system because I will be filing a breach of settlement against the university.
And so reality, we're just like back to square one. Like
exactly.
But I know that you don't feel like the trial was completely in vain. What do you feel like you accomplished by reporting?
Yeah, I think one major positive for me is that my objective was never a conviction because, like you said, it's statistically like next to impossible. But reporting does have the potential to legitimate your claim. I would hate to go on with my life always wishing I had reported and not having done it.
I know you've had to deal with trolls incessantly. Where do you gather your strength from to pull through that kind of constant negativity from the public?
My trolls also give me my best material. So like turn it around. Like sometimes I'll retweet the things they say about me because sometimes they're pretty creative and funny. Yeah, and then taking breaks from social media because it's just like so miserable and nasty, but also as like a source of like, I've met so many people who came out to the trial because they learned about it on Facebook or Twitter and were supportive and are like my friends now. And I've like subsequently supported folks at their trials because we met on social media. So it's like this like double-edged sword. Like there's some great aspects of it, but then there's also some really like negative pieces to it too.
What do you hope to work towards in the future with your activism around sexual assault?
I'm gonna work on my book about Tinder dating after sexual assault.
I'm already ready to read it.
It's a picture book. And I'm working on my dissertation, and my dissertation is about women who are sued for talking about their experiences of sexual violence.
Which is a real thing.
Unfortunately, it's very common these days.
Do you have anything else to add? That's pretty good. If you could wave a magic wand and fix like one thing about the system, what would you fix?
Victim witnesses would have their own legal counsel present in court if I had to pick one thing. What would you pick?
only female officers with ample training should respond to female victims of sexual assault. That can be your first point of contact with the system so often that it can really make or break your experiences. And I hear just so many stories that are negative from people about their interactions with the police when they report.
It's a site of misogyny and rape culture, like, amplified.
Maybe I would even eliminate that from the process, because they don't actually investigate.
No.
They don't actually like go and interview people. It just ends up they take your notes and then they talk to him and they take his notes. And then you've got he said, she said on a piece of paper. So that's the same thing the lawyers will do. I almost think we could just eliminate that from the process.
In Manitoba, they just implemented it. And also in British Columbia, you can actually do what's called third-party reporting, where you report to like a community, like a sex assault center. And then they forward the report to the cops. The cops are like so irrelevant. Like, none of them are doing anything. Like, for me, like, I did my what's called a KGB statement. It's a recorded video statement. That was enough. That's enough evidence to arrest somebody in a sex assault case, because that's primarily the only evidence they're going to use.
Yeah, and then they don't do anything else. So I'm not really sure what their purpose truly is in this process.
Just abolish the police.
Yeah, trust no police.
Trust no cop.
What about rape culture? How can we eradicate rape culture?
So tell me about rape culture. I think abolishing the cops is a good start to abolishing rape culture.
Yeah, probably so.
Sex ed. Like, stop shaming people for their bodies, for sexuality, like masturbation, all of that. Like, there's so much shame and stigma attached to sexuality, and it manifests in really fucked up ways, like sexual violence and like entitlement. These are so simple, and I don't know why it's even controversial.
I know, and there's so many schools that don't even have sex ed curriculum at all, because private schools aren't even mandated to even have it. So kids that aren't going through like a progressive public system or going to a progressive private school, they might not even be getting any sex ed at all.
I just read a study, and it was like between 40 and 50% of grown men didn't know how to identify a vagina on a diagram.
I'm not surprised.
But like, it's just like horrifying. But people are so scared. Like, even if I just say the word rape or sexual assault or even like sex, people get so weird about it. So I just talk about it all the time.
Yes, I think the best thing is to just talk about it all the time. I do feel like there's a like kind of a new emerging collective rage around sexual assault amongst women, and people are moving away from like, oh, that's so sad. I'm like so sorry that happened to you, to like, fuck that guy, we got to do something about this. Like, people are really angry and fired up. So it's like our moment in time to flip the switch on this.
Yeah, like, people say there's stigma about being a victim or claiming having experienced sexual violence, and maybe there is stigma, but like, I don't feel it very much. But maybe it's like, also I'm in my feminist bubble, and like all my friends have been raped.
Which is the best. Not the friends being raped, but the feminist bubble is the best place to be. And
then I go in the real world and I'm like, this is too scary. I'm going back in.
The male rights activists are going to love this episode, Mandy.
Yeah.
They're going to love every episode of this podcast.
They keep me relevant. Thank you.
Thanks. This one is for you, MRA. It's male rights activist Diana Davidson, and
the former feminist.
The former feminists out there, and the anti-feminists out there, and all the trolls.
In that article in the Free Press, I went on the online comments. The very first one was, "This woman is nuts," in capitals. I'm like, I proved my point.
Sluts are nuts. I'm both. We hope you enjoyed this show. And again, you can find all the details on streaming Slut or Nut: The Diary of a Rape Trial, on organizing a screening, or ordering a DVD on our website at www.slutornut.ca. Thank you for listening.